Hello and welcome to the Mighty Oak Show today. Glad to have you with us. Looking forward to a great conversation. And before we jump into that, though, I want to remind you, as I do every week, to go over to YouTube. If you're not watching this on YouTube, go to YouTube. You can subscribe to the channel there. That's the Mighty Oaks Foundation channel, Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs. You can find our YouTube channel there. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell. That lets you know when more content comes online. And I say this just about every week. There's constantly new content being updated there, and excited to share that with you. And we've got some exciting new content coming out in the very near future. We just finished a documentary that will be airing in the near future and trying to get the final touches on that. But a lot of great stuff, testimonials, and just information that can be helpful to you. So please check that out. If you are listening over at one of our other places, the podcast, or with Mojo 50, again, thank you for listening. Please take some time when you get the opportunity after the show, not right now, but after the show, to go check out the YouTube channel, and we would love to share that with you. And there's so many good things going on right now that we'd like to keep you up to date on those things. So thank you very much for that. Looking forward to our conversation today. One of the issues, I was going to say topics, but one of the issues that we regularly encounter through the work that we do here at the Mighty Oaks Foundation, working with veterans and active duty service members, one of the big issues that we deal with is the issue of transitioning out of the military into a civilian job, or just out of the military, retiring into the civilian world. But that transition is so critical, and many people don't do it very well. In fact, a lot of what we see, a lot of what we deal with and try to help people through is transition, because bad decisions are made along the way, and that takes folks into a bad place. One of the very interesting things about this is that transition is not unique to military service. It seems a little more punctuated perhaps, but folks who are transitioning out of a career or transitioning out of a relationship, or whatever the case, transition, if not handled well, can be very damaging to relationships and to futures. So very, very important conversation, and glad to have my friend here today to talk about this. Luke Dodd is with us, and Luke works with us here at the Mighty Oaks Foundation, but Luke and I go back about 20 years.
Long time.
It's a long time, because you're pretty old.
Yeah.
And I'm not that old, but we served together in the Marine Corps, and served together at 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, and deployed to Iraq together during OIF 1. And I've just been friends since then. And just recently, you retired out of the Marine Corps, and have transitioned. Really, working with us is the second stop on your transition. You worked for another company before that, and I wanted to talk about that for a little bit. But before we jump into that, give us your background a little bit for people that don't know you. It's always interesting to hear how people ended up in the Marine Corps, and kind of your some of the jobs and some of the things that you did while you're in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so for me, it's you kind of look at it, looking at close to 22 years and the jobs I had in the Marine Corps. I started off as an infantry guy. You stated 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. But before that was with 3rd LARs, my first duty station in wonderful 29 Stumps. So that, and then,
what year was that?
That originally came in 1995.
1995.
Yeah,
August. You are old.
Yeah. So you're right there with me. I think you're just a few months.
Not too far behind.
So that was originally in 1995 with 3rd LAR. At that time, from 95 to 99 was my active years, and then for there I actually got out of the Marine Corps. People join the Marine Corps, as you very much know, is for a career of exploring. Well, during that time frame, nothing was being explored.
There wasn't a lot going on.
Yeah, nothing at all. So it was boring per se.
Right.
So I got out of the Marine Corps, and then came back in. Did a little bit of jobs outside. Yeah. And came back in 2002. Came back in, at that time, it was 2000, that's when you and I met in 2002.
Yep.
And then we, from there, obviously, we look at the rest as history with regards to 1st Battalion. And then after that, a little bit, a couple deployments, several deployments. I think I said, got tired of being the guy on the ground. I think we were just talking about this, being, going to the field all the time.
Right.
And I think I said I finally got smart and went into the intelligence world.
People that aren't familiar with the infantry community, it's a really interesting community, because of the way that work happens for a lot of reasons, obviously. But if you are not deployed forward, then you're training to deploy. And typically that looks like 3 or 4 days in the field just about every week. And it depends on what the training is. So you'll be home for a couple of days and then not deployed, but
feels like a
training. Yeah, I mean, they're 3 straight days or 4 straight days. Yeah. And then you put, longer training evolutions on top of that, and it can get really old really fast.
Yeah.
It's fun to play for a little while, but it gets less fun the longer you do it.
Yeah, the less fun is when you get older. I think is when you don't want to go out there and
then it hurts more.
It hurts more. And it takes time to wake up and stuff. So, but yeah, so I think that's when I transitioned into the intel world, 2010 timeframe.
Yeah.
And, imagery analyst. That's where I was at. I look at the world from the top down.
Yeah. What does an imagery analyst do?
So from that, we break it down. The easiest way to put it is to, if you're looking, we deal a lot with, like you say, like Google Earth. We dealt with things, working for, building, RAID packages, stuff that we had probably received, in our time, on the field, breaking down the doors and stuff like that. Right. So I looked at some of that stuff, and I think you remember him, a good friend of ours, now retired at the time, Master Sergeant Tyler Hamill. Yeah. Brought me into this the 0241 field. We just, for me, I was on the other side of the world to be able to help the infantry guys. So I still had that love and passion with the infantry.
Right.
Never left, but I brought a different perspective to it, to the infantry world, to the intel world.
We're old enough to remember when we went to Kuwait and then deployed into Iraq, we were given a map book.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, a lot of those were maps, but a lot of those were also images from various satellites and that. And that's how we navigated. We didn't have a lot of the technology that GPS quickly came online. Yeah. I always tell people that I bought a Magellan GPS at Target before I left and used that for a lot of the navigation. But all of that collateral, those pictures, those images, you look at, a raid on a bridge, which I've told that story many times of the raid we did on that bridge. All of that came from somewhere.
Right. Yeah. And that somewhere was, high in the sky. It's kind of amazing.
Right.
But so it's it was fun. It's interesting. I said transition with that one into the 2010 era, and then from there fast forward a lot, and just building different things. Several deployments with that one on the intel world, but more of the controlled environment.
Right.
But again, to being happy, having to have to not be laying down on the ground.
Right.
So. But so then the transition for me, a lot of it, carried into it. It was come to retirement. Everybody has to figure out that new journey in life, that transition that you were speaking of. So it's just kind of crazy. For me, I look at it at just 2019 is when I retired.
So in 1995, you went into the Marine Corps.
Correct.
And then you retired last year. So 22 years, but there was some broken time in there. So how many years is that? That's almost 30 years of...
Yeah, right? Yeah. So I guess overall, so 95, So, long I was
time.
only out for about 2.5 years.
How old were you when you went into the Marine Corps?
18 years old.
So your whole adult life basically was spent in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
People ask why those in the military identify so closely and so tightly with their military service. I think there are a lot of reasons, but one is that you come out of high school, you go into the military, whether it's the Marine Corps or another service, and in those formative years of young adulthood, that's who you are and that's what you are. You'll see folks who will retire 20 years later, 30 years later, and in a lot of ways, they're still that 18-year-old, recruit going into basic training, because although they've grown and they've matured and they've changed, the world has changed in ways that they're not familiar with, maybe.
Yeah, I think sometimes you could say it to where, military in general, you look at an institution where you're growing inside that institution, but outside sometimes you grow, things aren't growing, I guess you'd say, but maybe, for lack of a word, maybe as fast on the outside, like you said, in your mind.
Right.
Because you go back to where, like you're just saying good night, it's like 1995 was when I originally came in. And, back then, we look at what was crazy then, but it was just like it was just yesterday. It literally seems like it was just yesterday. Like when for our first deployment to Iraq, it seemed like to me it just seemed like it was just yesterday. But when you sit there and talk about it just now, I mean,
the institutional piece is crazy because you learn to function within the context of that institution.
Right.
And even when you're on leave or you're at home at the end of the day or whatever, you're still connected to the institution.
Yeah.
And to separate out of that can be an extreme challenge. I think, though, people coming out of other careers dealing with the same thing. We law enforcement, a lot of folks we know are in law enforcement, and we work with the law enforcement community. And it's much the same way. People transitioning out of law enforcement into a civilian life, and they just have a really hard time transitioning.
Yeah, I think like you said, I mean, a lot of it, like we hit here, we're still trying to identify with what we know inside the institution or law enforcement or whatever.
Right.
And it's just you have to figure out a way to, remove yourself from that. It's time to, you have to sit down and plan,
Right.
It's time to take that new transition or, to have that successful transition, into your new career, because it is a new career.
Yeah.
It's a whole new world.
Whatever happens next.
Yeah, exactly. Wherever, that job, that good job or wherever it may take you.
Yeah.
Whatever's next, you have to be, diligent about that, aspect of that transition for, in personal life.
It seems like one of the difficult things about transitioning, particularly out of the military or a paramilitary organization like a police department or something, is maybe even in a company, is respect and authority that's built over a lifetime of working in the institution, whatever that institution is. Once you leave that, you put the uniform away, you walk away from the title, whatever. Now you're not Master Sergeant Dodd, you're Luke.
And Luke, yeah.
And trying to deal with emotionally maybe the lack of, who am I in this? I don't have the respect that I used to have. I mean, you left after 22 years. You were a Master Sergeant. You're running your own shop, I guess what you call it in the intel world, but your own unit, and now you're Luke.
Yeah. So like right there, I mean, you kind of hit it. You hit the nail on the head right there. It's for me, like you said, now obviously I'm here, with Mighty Oaks, but I did have a time when I was with another company.
Yeah.
For me, it was still in that intel world. I look at it as it was a milestone for me at that other company.
Yeah.
But it was time for me to build what I had. But kind of back up what you were saying is that transition. Yeah. Master Sergeant Dodd, in charge of 75, 80 plus Marines underneath my charge, to making those decisions for 75 plus people, helping them out, steering them down the path, giving them guidance, this, that, and the other, to taking off that uniform, like you stated, walking out of my office into another office, and per se, like we refer to as civilian clothes,
right.
But yeah, I think it was kind of, you said for that was I think sometimes it was harder on the Marines. Sometimes they're like, what do I call you? It's like, what do we do with my hands?
Because you worked in the same office, but in a civilian capacity.
As a civilian capacity,
right.
So those guys were. I basically, jokingly, I say, like, what do we call you? I'm like, you can call me whatever you want, just don't call me late for lunch.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm Luke. They're like, but like, yeah. So, but yeah, it's a difficult transition.
Did that working in the same office, did that help you or make the transition more difficult?
I don't think it. I don't think it made it difficult. It actually, allowed me to, almost kind of decompress a little bit. Like I said, I had 75 plus individuals underneath me. To unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, but fortunately at the same time, I was responsible for myself.
Right.
So it allowed me to have that transition, and it was still giving guidance. I mean, people were still talking to me, and I'm like, but at the same, I couldn't make those decisions. For them. Yeah. I could have been.
Right.
All words, I could be fired from a job.
Right.
People say I've been trying to get fired for years with the military.
Right.
I was like,
can't do it.
You can't do it, but I could have been fired. Yeah, so it was. I think it actually may have maybe helped me a little bit to kind of decompress a little bit.
Yeah, to focus on yourself as you were transitioning out.
Right.
What are some of the other, either you experienced or you've seen others experience, some of the other challenges of transition? I say this all the time, that success in any area of life is directly tied to how well you handle transition.
Sure.
Doing your job, hopefully you're good at your job, but it's when you have to transition to something else, there's not clear guidance. How well you handle that really will determine whether or not you're successful later on. What are some other challenges with transitioning out of the military or otherwise?
Yeah, so like you said, the challenges that I see is, like you said, it was easy for me to to talk everything within the lingo of the military, because we understand it. And I think for me, again, you're referring to my story is that job that I maintained was still, I was still able to talk the lingo. So, but was that helping me or still hindering me? I think a little bit of both. But there's, a lot of challenges. I think a lot of times I see where there's guys like, hey, what's your plan? They have no plan. I broke it down to a plan. Like for me, I had, I literally treated it as my transition as a military operation.
Why don't people take it more seriously? I know the military has tried since probably forever. I remember when I was in the Marine Corps transitioning out, you have to go to classes, and I think the military has doubled down on that. I think they've made the classes longer, the information more.
Yeah.
So the military is trying. Why don't people take the transition more seriously?
So I think a lot of times they may not take it serious is because it's kind of hard for me to use my job in the military, because it's it's kind of prevalent. It is a unique job, but it is out there. So they may rely solely on their military experience to get a job. And yes,
they assume they'll be able to jump into something else.
They're just going to land that, that $100,000 plus job a year. And it's there's a we use that word assume a lot. And then they don't have, like for me, again, I said I broke it down like a military operation where for me I developed my primary route, and I had an alternate route, and then I had a tertiary route. Right. So
these routes represent, I'm going to do that first. If that doesn't work, I'll transition.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it's like I had options to do those different routes. Right. For me, obviously, it was a lot of. There were a lot of restless nights. I'm not saying I did everything right, but again, at the same time, a lot of praying and a lot of, there was a lot of worrying. It was, people are like, how are you going to survive, out here in California? I'm like, well, it's, it's not about how, but it's just ultimately, relying, on stuff. It's not me. Obviously, I look at it as, the blessings that we've had and being able to survive, to live here. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is, people just assume that, that they're going to have that job and everything's going to transition into landing that perfect job outside of taking their military experience. I look at it as, guys that may, for me, again, there's other countless jobs, obviously you very well know, inside the military, but I only know two of them specifically. Right. I look at it as, if you're on the infantry side, most of those guys, they may unfortunately have to end up into the law enforcement world where they're comfortable with that transition, and again, there's nothing wrong with it, but who's going to say that they're out there, for those jobs? Because we, now we're obviously in the middle of this, the situations where we're having now, where everything is over, virtual world, doing these virtual interviews, and we couldn't, prepare for something like that, But like you said, I think the military's trying. I think they're doing well. I've seen it twice. Back in '99 when I got out, those classes were, I think they were a few days long, and to me, I look at it as like they were just a check in a box because I had to do that. You can relate to those, but now it's like,
when I took that class that was called TAP, I think at the time, right? I don't know what it's called now, but I showed up the first morning. The Marine who was running the class said, "Hey, sir, you can come back in a couple of days, I'll sign your paper.
Yeah.
I left, I came back 3 days later, he signed my paper, and that was it. That was my whole transition process.
Yeah.
It was a check in the box.
Yes. Yeah. They tried to be a little bit more diligent and actually set people up for success afterwards. Yep. But again, I think a lot of those guys, they may just get into it because they think that they may have everything lined out. They assume again they're going to land. You know.
And even like in the infantry community, going into law enforcement or the fire service or some of these other kind of more popular fields, there's no guarantee that there's going to be a job even there waiting for you.
Right.
Because you're competing with other people who are, more or less qualified, and you're in line, so you don't know.
Yeah, and I think like you said right there, a lot of it, the mentality from us is, I say younger generation, I said, nothing wrong with doing, not the full 20. There's absolutely nothing wrong. It could be, 4, 10, whatever.
Right.
If it's your time to go, you know that when it's your time to go. But what I was getting at is people may have that assumption, people being veterans, assume that just because, let's say, you had no military experience together, everything is, paper-wise, you and I are the same. I look at it as, to the veteran, like, oh, I have this military experience.
Right.
I'm going to be guaranteed that job because he has no military experience. And that's a lot of times that door is quickly shut on that veteran, and then they have no secondary and or tertiary, plan set aside because, again, they were making that assumption that they're going to get into that, that law enforcement or whatever job it may be. I mean, it could be, managerial side, which is, again, it's they think that, a lot of it, and I think that sometimes with me, I thought about it too. It's like, oh, I got this. I'm a veteran. Well, it's great. You do get it, but
there are 18 million veterans in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Huge number that you're competing with.
Right.
So I think they need to. But I would say one thing is that as veterans, I'm not saying take it out of the equation, because yes, I'm happy to do it. I was proud to do it.
Of course, yeah,
but
of course.
You can't rely on.
You cannot rely
on that as being one of your. I'm a veteran. I'm going to get that job.
What are some of the? So in addition to that challenge and some others, what are the challenges of transition for the family members? I know your family very well, and I've watched your kids grow up, and your wife Ann works for us as well. So we spend a lot of time together. Our families have, but I know that through that process, you as the service member transitioning are not the only one who's bearing the weight of that transition. I think sometimes we forget that there are kids and there's a spouse and other people who are also dealing with the transition. What are some of the unique challenges for a family member or the family of the person who's transitioning?
Yeah, so obviously, a really good point, because, unlike the military where you basically, hey, this is where you're going.
Right.
Now it's kind of like, okay, where do we want to go? Where do we want to kind of set down our roots a little bit? I think, with some of those challenges, because it makes you want to think, again, bringing, we should, I'm not saying I got everything right, but I'm just sitting there thinking about this, is where you want to bring your family into that decision.
Yeah,
because you want them to be comfortable and happy.
Yeah.
You don't want to, it's not just my decision. It's now our decision.
That's a great point for everything, though. I give that advice a lot, is what do I do?
Yeah.
Well, bring your family into the decision, whatever it is. But particularly during a transition.
Yeah,
sure.
And I think with them, if you bring them in and chat with them, and like you said, and she's a California girl, so I think maybe me trying to pull her out of California might have been a little bit hard.
Going back to Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's it might have been a little bit harder, but so I think just sitting down and just just weighing it through and just talking with them. I think that even my daughter, 12 years old, bringing her into, you back it up a little bit with the age, bringing her into where you want to, what do you want to do? How do you see this? Because again, that would be taking away from friends and family and what she is known as her life here. Because again, it's not just me again. Yeah, it's us.
And the security issue too is a big one, right? Particularly for someone who's been in the military a long time. Your spouse, your family can depend on a paycheck on the 1st and 15th, and housing, and people who are going to help you make these decisions. And now all of that's being taken away.
Yeah, and I think with that is, I did have that security blanket a little bit. With retirement, allowed me to relax a little bit and understand, like, I may not need, again, I'm not saying I got it right. I look at it now, like, I thought I was relaxing, but, Ann's like, hey, what's wrong?
Right.
I was not relaxed. I
Right.
was stressed over something, but I think that's just, but again, God's blessing, and obviously just relying, on that aspect of it is where, we take it. But yeah, I think like you stated, just bringing them into the mix, because again, it's just, you're one, I've told many of my Marines, and I've said it many times, is I try to keep the family incorporated as much as I can, because Master Sergeant Dodd is just words now. What I've left behind there is hopefully instilled some of the stuff with those guys there, but my family is always with me now.
That's right.
It's there. I'm an afterthought as far as Master Sergeant Dodd. It's now Luke Dodd.
Yeah, and you've had to bring your family through that.
Right. Yeah, and bringing them through that, and me understanding that a lot is trying to find that again, we look for these identities, that new. It's a new world. Yeah. I mean, it's a completely new world, because that comfort of being, again, that guarantee of those paychecks coming in, that guaranteed rent, that guaranteed, food money. Yeah. Now the only thing I get is guaranteed, I mean, there's a little bit of a guarantee, but if the government shuts down,
even that's not guaranteed.
That's not even guaranteed right there. So
what's really interesting too about that is what you would deal with as a mid-40s guy, most people are dealing with as a newly married couple at 18 or 19 or 20. And that's a time when you don't have a lot of responsibilities, you don't have a lot to lose, you don't have kids in college, you don't have any of that. So that stuff has been dealt with, and then you build from there. People transitioning out of the military, it's like they flip that over. And now you guys are dealing as a couple with stuff that you've never dealt with in some of those decisions, and you're dealing with it at a time in life where there is a lot to lose and there's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you could say I lived that when I got out of the Marine Corps. 99. Yeah, I got out. Newly married. Yeah. New son, eldest now at the time. And just uprooting again, and I went out and worked for family. I think that was one of the, they say, never work for family. It was, it's a whole nother
It was
story.
a place to work.
Yeah. So it was, I think having that, I mean, I didn't have a plan. Yeah. And I look at that again, the ignorance that I had in myself back then. I was relying on, what I got. At the time I was a tow gunner. I could push a button, watch a missile go down range and blow stuff up. Was I going to do? Become a mercenary and
right. Yeah, that's not a real marketable skill.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not too much. But yeah, so looking at that, kind of taking some of those challenges back then, and trying to say, hey, I don't want to do that again. Again, learning from your mistakes, that was caused on, self-induced, right? Because I just uprooted that. I didn't have anything. Yeah, we had no plan. Didn't sit and chat. One thing, I basically said, hey, this is where we're going. This is what it could do. This is what's easy. Right. I mean, that's a key word. I think easy. It was easy for me to do what I could do. Right. But it was very, very hard. Yeah. It was hard.
I'm just jumping through topics, but the camaraderie piece of separating out of the military, I know that's a challenge for a lot of people, because sometimes people do transition into a new job, and it's a good job, and maybe it's a career that they could live out for 20 years, but they still really struggle. And what I'm told often is it's the camaraderie, it's the brotherhood, it's that being connected to people of a like mind and focused on a mission. How important is that?
The importance of that camaraderie?
Yeah, the camaraderie, but the challenge of not having the same camaraderie on the other side of a career.
I think, if we're going with that one is, in a sense, I mean, like for me, again, retiring, took off the uniform, walked into the office with regular clothes on. I still had that same camaraderie, so sure. It kind of aided me, but when I fully removed myself completely from that institution, again, just not, right. A lack of word there, it allowed me to, thoroughly understand. It was still there, but it opened up a whole new world.
Right.
But the camaraderie there, I think, with those guys, you always built. I mean, I could pick up the phone and chat with those guys all day long now, but I think it did aid me, and they aided me. Helped me along, if that's making sense a little bit there.
To have that, to continue to have that on the other side.
Yeah, to have it, to not rely on, but to know that it's there. It was that pillow cushion.
And this is the importance of, for a lot of people, it's belonging to a VFW or to, depending on where you live in the country. Here it's a little bit easier, particularly working for, here there are a lot of military people, and so that's not the biggest problem probably. If you move to Oceanside outside of Camp Pendleton or outside of a base, it's probably, you have a lot of people to relate to, but maybe you don't. But that's the importance of a service member finding a group of other veterans that they can spend time with and talk to and be encouraged with, and just within that community.
Yeah, I think with that there, you build that, again, that camaraderie, that rapport with other guys. It may be a whole nother, gives you a whole nother skill set.
Yeah.
It allows you to, blossom in a sense, the whole, blossom where you're planted, bloom where you're planted. Building that camaraderie with a whole nother world, it makes you, that much more marketable.
Right. To
step away from your identity. It makes you think.
Yeah.
Outside of the box.
A lot of people like to isolate when they separate from the military, and that is a huge problem in the veteran community. And I think saying, well, I can't have that camaraderie, that brotherhood anymore, it's just not true. You need to go out and find that somehow.
Oh yeah, I think, like you said, I think a lot of us we just we isolate ourselves, like you just stated, because we have that that assumption. I think a lot of times some of the hard stereotypes may be in a sense with us is that that we may not fit in that less formal formal work environment.
Sure.
We may not be able to put on that suit and tie. That's some of the stereotypes that, again, veterans, coming from both sides. It could be that employer, looking at as us as veterans as having that stereotype we may not fit in with.
They don't understand the veteran either.
Right? Yeah, in the same process. But again, for me, I look at it as you need to build your network. When I say the network for us old guys, our Rolodex of names.
Right.
We need to have that, and it just not just, our military, because you have to step away from that.
Right. And continue to expand what the network looks like.
Exactly. Build that network. And I think that a lot of them with me is where that's, I had my plan, I had my network. I started, knocking down, my transition.
How important, amongst other things, we also go to the same church and we're involved in the same church, and that creates a community as well. How important has a church community and some of those relationships been to your transition?
So with that, it's huge because for us, being able to stay here, that was a lot of our decisions. I'm not trying to say it was one of our number one decisions. Right. We had our church family. That is our family in a sense. Sure. Obviously we have our blood family, but we don't. Yeah.
Who cares about that?
Yeah, who cares? Yeah, but no, it's but that our church family. Yeah. And like you said, you and I mean, we've military, church, friendships, and that. And I think the stuff like that I look across, and we've built that here. But the church family is a huge part for us. Yeah. For me, I mean, transition. I know this is all about transition, but knowing when I was gone. Family here is Ann and the children were, they could pick up the phone at a heartbeat. And,
they were connected as well.
They were connected in the church. But after the fact, we know a lot of the same people that if we came in, if I had a problem. I could probably pick up the phone for a half dozen guys or so like that could be there to be there, to be our backbone in a sense to air out.
And that's where the transition from the military and that community that you find there to civilian employment or just retirement. I mean, for some, they'll retire and I don't know what they do. They'll do something else. But there is a community that exists that kind of follows. And so it's not like you're walking out of, I've got this community. And even for families, there are a lot of family organizations within the military. But when you leave, you don't have that anymore.
Right.
But having a church, having another place where you can find that community, it really gives some continuity on the other side of service.
Yeah, and it was, again, a huge decision for us because I think a lot of us, with our church, it's there for us because people look at us like, we travel the same distance in a sense. You're like, you travel how far?
Yeah,
it's worth it to us,
right?
Because we have those ties there, that support there.
Yeah.
Because I think if you remove yourself, I'm not saying that our church is the only church. There's a lot of good churches out there. Just very partial to ours.
Right. Sure.
So it's if you remove yourself from there, I think that's where you start to fail. You start to stumble. You start to isolate because you think that you can't. You're relying on self.
Yeah.
And that's where us as humans, we can't rely on self.
We need to be in a group of people who can kind of push our vision outside of that. Yeah.
If we're hosing it up, I would hope that somebody could tell me, hey, you're hosing us up. You're wrong. And I think if you don't have that, you don't want those guys to just be like, yes sir, or you got it all figured out. You need those people to keep you in check.
Yeah. We in our programs we talk about the 4 B's. And 2 of the 4 B's, so there's be in prayer, there's be in the word, but the other 2 are be in fellowship, and that's in the context of a local church. And then be in connection with what we call a corner man. That's, a mentor would be another way to say that, I guess. But it's funny, in all that we teach and all that we do and all the tools that we offer, continuing comes down basically to 4 things. Are you praying? Are you reading your Bible? Are you in a church community?
Yeah.
Because of what you just said. You cannot isolate if you're in a healthy church community because you have people around you. It's so important. Identity is something that you've mentioned a few times, and I talk about all the time. I believe, rightly or wrongly, I believe that transition is difficult because in the process of that, we would use the phrase, we lose our identity, or we walk away from an identity. There are a lot of different ways to say that, but the reason transition is hard is because we knew who we were over there, and we don't know who we are where we are now.
True.
How do you maintain your identity or regain your identity? How do you lean into a healthy identity on the other side of military service or, again, any type of career that you might have to transition out of?
Yeah, so that's a good point. It's that identity I had, Master Sergeant Dodd. People were constantly. We had no problem. I loved it. I enjoyed being there for those guys. But to wake up one day and realize like, hey, I think I put it like this. It was kind of a pre retirement, couldn't turn that cell phone off.
Right.
And there was one day where I turned my cell phone off and it's like, hey, there's absolutely no cause why I need to turn that thing back on.
Sure.
And then quickly anxiety took over and I had to turn it back on. But no, so I think with that is the identity that I have is you're looking for that to make yourself marketable. Because for me, I look at it as there's a lot of things that I may know. I just need, if it's a transition to a new job, I do my research in a sense for that job, and I make myself marketable for that job. If I think I hope I'm answering this question. I'm kind of going down the path a little bit to where it allows you to grow because again it removes this military identity for you to start a new career, because that's what you're doing. You're starting a whole new career. For me, when I was 18 years old, it's almost to say the same thing again. Where an 18-year-old, but at 40, starting a whole new life.
Right.
So it makes you really step away and start thinking of what you have to market yourself. In trying to find out, there's some principles that you can apply, for jobs, and there's a lot of them, but you try to, again, you develop and deliver your self-marketing message to whomever it may be to start that whole new identity.
Yeah. So it's almost as if we hold two identities at the same time.
Yeah.
There's our workplace identity. This is who I am at work. If work is the military, this is who I am in the military. But then there's the who I am as a human being identity. And we talk a lot about our identity being found in Christ. And that's true, but we can also identify with the job that we do.
Yeah.
And part of this, I think, is not getting those two confused, not buying into the belief that my work identity is who I am.
Right.
I have separate identities, because then on the other side, as you just mentioned, I'm going to market myself to the new place, or I'm going to figure out the new culture and the new job, and that will be my work identity now. It really is holding both at the same time.
Yeah, it is. I think if you start getting that self-identity is when you start stumbling to the level of...
When you identify with your job.
Yes, to taking away the relationship you have with God, in a sense, self-identifying as solely this is it, and not relying on Christ to help you through a lot of this. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying I got it all right, but it's I think if you start going back to the 4 B's, if you aren't reading and being diligent about being connected with your church family, I think that where you start failing and you're setting yourself up for failure in a sense too.
And that's how you grow your identity, is by being in the Word and being in that church community.
Yes, right.
And it needs to be said that finding that identity, who I am, should begin before you ever transition out of a job or a workplace.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me to watch people who transition from a career like the military into something else. It seems to be so seamless. I'm sure there are struggles, but they seem to do so well. And then there are other people who, it's like they fall into a pit and they just can't figure it out. Part of preparing for a transition is understanding I'm a dad, I'm a husband or wife, I'm, whatever. These are my roles in life, and I also do this job.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like you said, there is, again, going back to that plan where you mission plan. You don't just go out there and wing it for a raid. You're not gonna just wing it. You set up, you do your intelligence, you do this, that, and the other. You have to identify the skills that you can offer to somebody. And I think if you find that job and that you start going down there, like, what is this person? What can I do to help them be successful? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, remove from a faith-based organization as such as here, it's all about the numbers. What's the bottom line?
Sure.
How can this individual be marketable for what's the bottom dollar?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying right or wrong, but not everybody can have the privilege to be working in an environment that puts God first. Again, there's nothing wrong with go out and finding the other job, and I think you understand where I'm going with that one. But it's you have to make what skills can you offer? Obviously you're aligning yourself and you're putting God first, but then that'll make your skills marketable for this individual to see something different in you, and that's again not it's God's doing in me, in him through me to this individual, and I think that's where again you develop that stuff for those
and that's
jobs.
Different than the approach you were talking about earlier. That is, because I was in the military, you employer owe me a job.
Oh yeah.
This is going to them and saying, I can offer these things to you that will make you and this company and this organization better.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of it is, it's not just that, that handout approach that, a lot of it, and I think like you were saying, right or wrong, again, my opinion, personal opinion, is people that may stumble for whatever reason, maybe have that just because they were in the military or whatever, it's their right that you give them that
because their identity is completely wrapped up in the military.
It's still wrapped up in being a master sergeant, being whatever it may be. And I think that's where the identity is wrong, and I think that's where they begin to fail.
And they instead need to look at what they did in the military as I acquired some skills, I connected with some people, and because I did that, this is what I'm bringing to you.
Exactly.
Instead of saying that's who I am, and because that's who I am, you owe me something.
Yeah, exactly. I think I think what I see, and I've seen a lot of people where, forced out or left at 4 to 8 years just because it was their time. And I think with me, I knew I was okay with my time.
Right.
Now I'm like I finally had that peace in a sense. But yeah, it was not having that entitlement.
How do you know when it's your time?
That's people I've been asked that is like, how do you know it's my time? I think for me it was just that ease of I reached to the point that I'm not saying that I wasn't giving up, but I knew for the point where I basically peaked out. That it could have been a challenge, but I think at the same time, it may have, at that time when I finally decided it was right for me, it was, again, I think if I would have continued on, it would have been a detriment to my family. So it was a huge, decision. I think, just being blessed, being able to reach, having that job, reaching at the level I reached as far as rank, retiring as a master sergeant, being in the career field I had, it was very, very competitive. So blessed to get to where I was at. But so how do you know it's your time? I think it's just, for me, I was at peace, that comfort that I knew that I'm okay with. I'm okay with it because there's other things outside of the military.
So being clear on your priorities helped process that.
Yeah. Having that, going back to that mission planning in a sense. So,
right. My wife and kids are more important than this job or whatever.
Yeah, because as you very well know, the Marine Corps is still going on.
They've been doing pretty good.
They've been doing pretty good for 245 years, and without you and I and a lot of other people, it's still.
I like to believe they're still doing well because we were there, though. So we did some things that have allowed them to continue on.
Yes, I think I agree with that. So,
what are a couple of other things that you would say this is important during a transition? You need to do this, or know this, or think about this.
Importance, I think it was with me, is trying to set yourself up for success as much as you can. Finances is a huge thing. Because there's no guarantee after the fact.
Right.
I'm not trying to, again, my story is different. I literally walked out and I had that job. I had a guaranteed letter before I even left.
Before you left, right.
And I was actually referred to as double dipping and getting paid and working at the same time.
Right.
Again, a blessing. Not always does it that the case. There could be a transition to where you may have 6 months of what in the world. I mean, look at it now. I know guys right now that are transitioning out, and like, what in the world am I going to do?
Sure.
Military's trying to help them out as much as they can. So I think they're for that they're actually trying to set them up for success as much as they can. They're extending their contracts, this, that, and the other, not making them make that decision.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing is, it's the root of all evil a lot of times, is the finances. I think if you can try to get yourself to a point to where you can comfortably look for that job, whatever it may be, if you can.
You're not in panic mode from day one.
You're not in panic mode for day one. You're like, I got to have this job or else I'm going to implode myself, because I think that's where a lot of stuff is. People are so far. Again, I just I tried to pay down. Our goal was try to be as debt free as possible. I'm not trying to bring this into a finance, but that's where I was at, where it allowed me to.
It's important. Yeah.
I didn't sit back on easy street, but if I needed to sit back on easy street, again, I know people are like, oh, you had that retirement check. Well, I also spent 20 years plus to have that. So that was a cushion.
Right.
So I had that, setting myself up for, trying to get a steady budget.
Yep.
Knowing what, I'm not even going to mess it up. I was going to try to, was it? Whatever, never mind. Having that, very little, as much as possible.
Yeah.
Debt.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's, some people say it's the root of all evil. It can be.
Yeah.
But
being debt free is
big.
It gives you a lot of leverage.
Yeah, it does, and I think the money, unfortunately, a lot of times is it could be a lot of stress inside the household as a family, for you, your wife, your children, and it just goes downhill from there.
Yeah, it's good.
But if you can get yourself to that level of comfort, that's why a lot of guys, I even have master sergeants right now reaching out to me. I just spoke to one a couple weeks ago. Hey, what do you do? Like, dude, if you can become, because I'm working on that, like, keep nailing that down, and you'll realize how much it'll allow you to be able to accomplish what you kind of want to do in a sense.
Yeah, that's good. So deal with your finances, have a plan with an alternative plan. Anything else?
I think just try to keep your family as much in
That's good.
I think, again, you look at it as trying to communicate as much as you can with them.
Yep.
Get their input. It may not be, what you want to hear all the time, but it's reality.
That's good.
It's reality. Like I said, your family's going to be with you until we're off to this earth.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
If you do it right.
Hopefully, if you try to do it right, wrong, and don't rely on that self-entitlement in a sense to where just because you're a veteran,
right,
that this job is entitled to you, because although it makes you marketable, there's no guarantee.
Right.
There's nothing there. There's no guaranteed job there for you.
Yeah, that's good. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, transition is so important, and again, it applies to every area of life, not just military service, but how you handle your transitions will determine how successful you are on the other side of those. And so many people don't handle them very well.
Right.
But yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for watching and listening, as the case may be. Again, if you have not yet taken the time to go over to YouTube, please do that. You can subscribe, hit the notification bell. Comment, we'd love to get comments, share the content out that may be helpful. All of us know people who are dealing with transitions, and there are a ton of other topics that we've talked about. You can find those as well on our channel, and I would love to share those with you. Thank you, and hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you next time.